Right, we'll talk about Spurs first and what this means and how they're so inconsistent and what maybe they could achieve come the end of the season. And then we'll talk about Everton and their relegation battle. The problem is, I think it's very difficult, isn't it, to separate the two subjects because, let's face it, if Spurs plays Everton like this every weekend, they'd win the league.
They would. I predicted before the game down 3. And as it was 3 at half-time, it could have been 7 or 8. I mean, the only positive for Frank Lampard after that game is he knows you can never, ever, ever play that back four ever again. Because the analysis at half-time, the analysis after the game, we're calling them a championship back four. And that's exactly what they were. The goals, as Stevie said there, were gifts. The first one was a gift. Pickford was a gift on the second one. And then you rightly say, you go in at 3-0 at half-time. The manager's obviously dug a few out at half-time and he's made a change and he's give one or two a little piece of his mind. And it was probably strong words. Then you think, right, second half, what have they got? 41 seconds into the second half, it's 4 and it's game over. And then the only other positive for Frank Lampard and Everton is Spurs actually took their foot off the gas. Because if they wanted to get 7, 8 or 9, it was there for them. It was horrendous from Everton's point of view.
Why do they play such a high line, Stevie? Is that not just inviting trouble?
I don't think they try to play a high line. The way Tottenham play is they sort of try and mug you. I mean, you look at the stats with the ball. I mean, there's not a lot between. There's only 10% between them for possession. So that tells you that all Tottenham were doing was just saying, come on then, and you come. As soon as you cough it up, then we'll get after you. I mean, that's all they did. It wasn't rocket science.
Right.
Everton coughed the ball up. Young Min Song with pace, with the craft of Kane, and obviously the incompetence that they have at the back. You end up losing 5, and as Don said, should have been more.
Spurs, they're such a lottery. You never quite know what you're going to get, Jules.
Incredible, really, and I don't think we've seen a lot of inconsistency so far this season. That's why if the season feels a bit different than others maybe, but for them, I mean, certainly the last 4 to 6 weeks have been incredible, to the point that obviously, as we saw after the Burnley game, Antonio Conte lost his chisels completely. But I mean, because how can you sometimes play so well? And of course, the opposition help you. Everton helped massively, Leeds helped massively last weekend as well. And as soon as they played against a more structured team with a better plan, like Southampton, for example, or even Burnley to a certain extent, then they struggle more. But if you play into their hands, that's what they're so good at. And today, I mean, I understand everything. I agree with everything the boys said, but Lampard has to take the blame as well for the tactics and the formation. I mean, that was never going to work. The 5 in midfield, across midfield, I mean, leaving Son and Kulusevski all the time on their own in the pocket between the lines. There was no awareness from that team. It was so poor from start to finish. You could tell from the beginning it was going to be a very, very difficult night for them.
So, Mark, where do we stand on Spurs' top 4 chances?
Well, look, they've got a massive game on Saturday, haven't they, at Man United? That's a big game for both. It's a huge... I think if there's a losing that game, they can forget about it. But I think Arsenal right now are obviously in pole position. They've got 4th place, they've got games in hand. But I just think Tottenham are too inconsistent. They won at Man City, then they lost at Burnley and lost at Middlesbrough. So how can we say with any conviction that they will, string a run of results together and get back in the top 4? I just don't see it. Look, they've got... in Harry Kane and Son, they've got a fantastic strike duo, but I just don't see them being consistent enough. So I think the game at Old Trafford will probably show us that, United and Spurs, 2 very inconsistent, hard to predict teams. It could go either way, but Tottenham is still there with a chance, but I think Arsenal have to be the favourites now.
How would you make them consistent, Stevie?
Wow, what a question that is. How do you turn a fiver into a 10-pound note? I mean... The reason that they're inconsistent is because of the players they have. The difference between the top sides and the also-rans is that the also-rans have got good players but can't produce 8 out of 10 every time they step on the field. That's what turns decent teams into great teams.
Right.
And to turn your team into one of the best teams, right now, if you're Spurs, you have to change the personnel. Because I've had long enough under this manager and other managers to try and get some sort of consistency. I mean, a great example is a guy like Ben Davies. Ben Davies against Manchester City was absolutely unbelievable. I'm thinking to myself, this guy is actually beginning to play at this position. And then the next day he steps on the field, he's an absolute embarrassment. So this team, I don't believe, will be consistent until you change some of the personnel.
Nothing to do with Conte, then? There's nothing he can do because of the players that he's working with?
I don't think so. We're talking about Everton defensively.
Yeah.
Now, I agree with Jules was saying that you looked at it and you thought, oh, I don't like the look of this. But then you look at who's available. They've got nothing.
Right.
They've got nothing. You've got Seamus Coleman, who unfortunately can't get around, and so ends up getting stuck between going forward and defending, and ends up doing nothing. You've got Keane, who's just not there. You've got Holgate, who's not a centre-back. And then you've got the left-back, who's not even a left-back. So if you're trying to put, square pegs in round holes, and it doesn't work, don't be surprised. But he doesn't have any other choice.
Meanwhile, for Conte and Spurs, Mark, is he going to be there next season? What is it dependent on factors? If he gets some money in the transfer window, if they finish in Europe, like where do we go from here?
I think those factors come into play. But let's be honest, what is Antonio Conte going to get that is better than Tottenham? Considering his track record recently, where he does kind of tend to walk out on jobs when he could be sticking around for a bit longer. So I think Tottenham is a good job. It's a club with the ambition of the stadium. It's got money issues, obviously, that have to be addressed, and Harry Kane might leave. But will he get a better job than Tottenham? I don't think he will. I mean, there aren't any jobs in England that are better than Tottenham. I don't think he'll get the Man United job because he could have had that in November and they chose to go elsewhere. So he might have to be pragmatic and think, this is a big club that can go places with the right management. He has to get into Daniel Levy's head and say, give me more control over player signings than previous managers have had. But I do think that if he sits down and thinks about it, managing Tottenham is not that bad a job at the end of the day. I think he might actually be better staying where he is and trying to turn Tottenham into a team that can challenge properly for the top four again, because they have been a bit hit and miss for the last 2 years. But, I think ultimately, if you ask me now, I think he'll stay.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.